All right, hey y'all, how you doing? If you got this far, make sure that you also know that there's a second video. It should be there will be a link. It's not showing here, but there will be a link on the front page of this PowerPoint lecture notes that you'll be able to download to a discussion of the first paper. Okay, so make sure you check that out before you write the first paper. It will benefit all of us if you write decent papers. Okay. All right. First, we're gonna do part one in the textbook. Chapter one was sort of like a little stuck at the beginning, kind of oddball. Yeah, good stuff, I guess, kind of. But anyway, we're into the beginning now. The first three chapters here, or my bad, chapters 2, 3, and 4 are all about social thinking, or the way that we think about our social world, or something like that. And we're going to start today on chapter 2. And with chapter 2, we're going to talk about the self and a social world. So this one is, again, it's a little bit odd, but the whole point behind this particular chapter is to help you to understand who you are and your ideas of your sense of self, because that is what you carry into your social world. And we'll be talking more about social interactions, but first we have to understand who you are entering this social world. As a rule, it's not like you're a passive victim of your social world. You bring things into your social interactions. You influence your social interactions. You are both influenced by and influence your social interactions. You choose the environments that you choose the environments that you go to. You choose the friends that you have. You influence those friends. Those friends influence you. But bringing into all of these social relationships is your sense of self. So we're going to start this stuff by understanding what sense of self means. So, in fact, here's our quote. Look at that. In the spotlight, and there's my picture, my video. I like that. There's an interplay between the sense of self and the social world. All right, I love it. The spotlight effect is the effect that the belief that others are paying more attention to our appearance and behavior than they really are. Yeah, there's a classic study with they put these kids and they had them wear a Barry Manilow t-shirt. Really embarrassing. At the Copacabana. Put that t-shirt on, send them into a classroom. These kids were just dying. They were so embarrassed. It was such a stupid t-shirt. And they were just blushing and everything. And after the class, they come out and then they ask, these kids wearing the shirt, how many people saw your shirt? And they were like, oh my God, everybody was staring at me. Then they asked all of the people in the class, and 23% said that they had even noticed that shirt was there. All right, none of them had said they were staring at it. All right, so you're not as important as you think you are, buddy. Okay. The illusion of transparency, the illusion that our concealed emotions leak out and can be easily read by others. Yeah, there's actually a truth to this. This is interesting. Well, here's in fact a study that they did. They had people give a speech, right? In one group, they just said they had them give a speech, and then they asked the people that gave the speech. They said, "What was the quality of the speech?" I guess they asked or no, that's speaker's self-rating. There you go. They asked this, the person giving the speech, "How good was your speech? And how relaxed did you feel?" All right. And then they asked the people in the audience, "How good was the speech?" And it's okay. So these are just ratings, like on a scale of 1 to 7 or something. No big deal. In a second group, they reassured them before the speech. They said, "It's okay, no problem. It's okay. You'll be okay." And reassuring them did not help. Okay, reassuring them did, though. If you take a look, it did. It made the speakers believe that their speech was worse, but it made the audience believe that the speech was slightly better. So a little bit by saying, "Hey." But then in the last one, the informed condition, what they did was they taught them about the illusion of transparency and said, if you're really nervous or something, nobody in the audience is going to know about it. So don't worry, okay? And in this condition, lo and behold, what happened was the speakers felt that their speech was better and the audience felt that their speech was better. So clearly, most of the nerves that you have when giving a speech in class are unjustified. The self-concept, okay? The answer to the question, who am I? Okay? So say as an interesting exercise, you guys know how to pause. Everybody write down 5 things. Here's this phrase. I am blank. Look at, I like this. I am, and then there's my picture. That's pretty. That's a pretty good image. I like this. Okay, so I am, and then fill in the blank with 5 different things, just off the top of your head, without stopping and thinking deeply about it. Okay, you just write those down. In the real test, by the way, there's 20. It's called the 20 statements test. 20 begins to get a little tedious, but we'll come back to that. Suffice it to say, the answers that you give to this type of a 20 statements test, or 5 in our example, are in some ways a reflection of our self-concept. A person's answer to the question, who am I? Well, I am a boy. Oh, okay, whatever. It's very interesting how people's responses to this I am will change as their social roles change, and will change as they get older, change as their cognitive structure changes. It's a very interesting thing. But the most important aspect of yourself is yourself. If you put the right hemisphere to sleep, yeah, they do this. Take the biopsych class. It'll freak you out how they do this. But you can put half of your brain to sleep. And if you put the right hemisphere to sleep, you look in the mirror and you're like, academically or intellectually or something, I know that's me in the mirror, but I don't really feel like it's me. Okay? I just don't get it. It sounds like depersonalization disorder. There's a particular pathway in the brain. If you think about yourself and then take a brain scan, and there's a very specific area of the brain responsible for our concept and understanding of who I am or who you are. Schemas. A schema, let's say very briefly from cognitive psychology. A schema is like a way of organizing the world or something like that. I might have a schema about restaurants. Let's say a general idea in my head about what a restaurant is supposed to look like. I go to cheap restaurants, so my schema of a restaurant involves salt and pepper at the table and ketchup at the table with a napkin dispenser, right? Now, if I were to, here, take a look at this restaurant for 3 minutes, and then afterward come out and we're going to ask you some questions about what you saw in the restaurant. Well, my memory of this new restaurant I've just looked at will be guided by my schema of what a restaurant is supposed to look like. So afterward, you're going to be like, was there ketchup on the table? I'm going to be like, dang. I don't remember if there was, but in my schema, in my idea of a restaurant, there should be ketchup. So I'm like, I think I did see ketchup on the table, even if there wasn't, but it's because my schema of a restaurant says that's how it should be. Now, we have schemas for a lot of things, including, the zoo or university classrooms or something. But we also have a schema about ourself, a belief about ourself, and in the same way that it organized our schema of a restaurant organized our memory of the restaurant, our self schema, a organizational belief about ourselves will guide the way we believe and remember and interact with the world. Like we says here, a self-schema would be a mental template that we use when interpreting ambiguous information. If I have a self-schema that involves low self-esteem, for example, then somebody I know walks past me and doesn't say hi to me. I might take this ambiguous situation if I have a self-schema that involves low self-esteem, and I might be like, well, you know what? She was supposed to say hi and she didn't say hi, but it makes sense because I'm a sucky person and she doesn't like me. But if I have a self-schema that involves a high self-esteem and the same scenario happens, I may well interpret this ambiguous thing and say, well, she was distracted and didn't notice me, and that can happen to anybody. Okay? So clearly, the way we interpret the world, the way we interpret social situations, is influenced by our belief systems about who we are. The self-reference effect, the tendency to process efficiently and remember well information related to oneself. Yeah, you could have 2 groups. One group reads a story, and the second group reads a story, and then is told afterward, okay, what I want you to do is compare that character to yourself. How is that character the same as you, different from you? And then bring everybody back after a week and see who remembers the story, okay? It's pretty straightforward. Possible selves are images of what we dream of or dread of becoming in the future. it's like a possible self is where we might possibly be, and it provides, in many ways, it provides motivation, right? It provides us with an incentive system or something. Incentive is not bad. Um, a student that I had a couple years back, she used to carry, and she was a woman, and she carried around on her binder, she had a picture of a very busty girl in a bikini, a very skimpy string bikini, busty string bikini, and I'm like, okay, woman, what is wrong with you? Okay, this is a classroom, but no, she used that as a motivation for what she wanted to become. So every time she would be tempted to eat one of the snacks from the vending machine or something, she would just sort of flip up her binder and look at it and go, I could be that. That could be me. And that's what she wanted. Everybody wants different stuff. But she used that idea of a possible self to motivate her to to change her behavior. The social self is who we are around other people, and this is very interesting. Who we are around other people is different. I mean, I play different roles. Say, for example, I'm a father and I'm a professor, so the roles I play help to define who I am, my social self. Social identity, the groups that I belong to, the church that I go to, or something, partly determines who I am. How I compare myself to other people. Sometimes your social self is defined, let's say, if you hang around with a group of losers, it's easy to be a winner, right? I'm the winner of the losers. You know, who you compare yourself to makes a huge difference of your social self. Um, and that is actually important to compare yourself to people that are comparable to you. If you're a college athlete and you're comparing yourself to Olympic athletes, you're going to have a low sense of self-esteem because your comparison group is perhaps inappropriate. Okay? And so we see all of these different things: the self-concept, self-knowledge, social self, self-esteem. They all feed together into your sense of self. So the self doesn't really have a very good definition. It's kind of a combination of all of these things shoved together. Uh, one one uh, One very important way to understand our sense of self comes from the idea of individualism and collectivism. Now, the first short paper is about this topic. So, as I said, take a look at the little separate video that discusses the first paper because it is rather extensive. Now, here we talk about individualism and collectivism. Individualism, by definition, the concept of giving priority to one's own goals over group goals and defining one's identity in terms of personal attributes rather than group identifications. Whereas collectivism is giving priority to the goals of one's group and defining one's identity accordingly. Suffice it to say, people in America tend to be more individualistic, and people from Asia tend to be more collectivistic. Now, there are in fact, I want to say America and Western Europe tends to be more individualistic. Asian cultures, African cultures, South American, Central American cultures tend to be more collectivistic. Tend to be. There's lots of individual differences within there, and it's not like this is an all or none phenomenon. Um, People, like I said, in America tend to be, it's like a continuum from one end individual. If it were possible, you could be completely and utterly individualistic or completely and utterly collectivistic. And nobody really falls there. You fall somewhere in the middle between these two extremes. If you're in America, you probably end up closer towards the individualistic one. But again, there's also situational differences. In some situations, I may be more individualistic. In some situations, I may be more collectivistic. Um, it depends. Okay. Very briefly, people in collectivistic societies, people are born into extended families and clans that protect them, but to do so you must have loyalty, must show loyalty. In individualistic, everybody's supposed to take care of him or herself and their immediate family. I take my role as the head of my family very, very seriously. As the protector of my home, I take this very seriously. I find that my identity is in fact based on my successes. If my brother has success, I mean, I'm like, yeah, I'm happy for you, but I mean, I really don't give a shit that much, right? It's my own successes or failures that really define who I am and stuff. So that is just the way we are in America. In collectivistic cultures, people are encouraged to adjust and restrain the self in order to better fit with a social group. Say, in Asian cultures, they're much more willing to have children wear uniforms. All children wear uniforms to school. There's no question about that, and people have no problem with it. Okay, they have no problem. In different studies, I mean, this is a huge thing. This is in fact, if you ever take the cross-cultural psychology class, this one difference really provides a framework for that entire course. I mean, there's more to it, of course, but that is the major, major distinguishing thing that breaks apart us from the rest of the world. So we find that people are socialized to be socially, emotionally independent. Emphasis is on belonging to a member. Yeah. So, like I said, people in collectivistic cultures, when they take the 20 statements test, are more likely to say, I am a member of my family. I am a son. I am a daughter. People from individualistic cultures are more likely to say, I am strong. I am smart. Personal characteristics. So here is this model, Markusonkitayama model, and I talk about it in great detail in that other video, so I really have no desire to talk about it here. Suffice it to say, what we have on the top, though, is two little research studies, which are kind of interesting. You take that that top picture of the fish, and you ask American people to describe the scene, and American people tend to focus their description on, like, there is a fish that is leading the others and he's clearly in charge or something, and defining an individual fish somehow. Whereas people from interdependent cultures, more collectivistic cultures, are more likely to define the relationships between the fish. Oh, the one fish is following the other fish, and they're both approaching the plant. Okay, they're talking about the relationship among the objects rather than individual objects themselves. Or here, in the top right, you got this simple study. I don't remember the details. It doesn't matter. Suffice it to say, it's something like this. You complete a study, and then afterwards you say to your participants, all right, would you like a pen? And so they put out this bucket of pens, and there's four green pens and one red pen. People from individualistic cultures are much more likely to grab that red pen, the one that's different. People from interdependent cultures, more Asian cultures, are much more likely to grab one of the green pens, part of the one that other people are going to have. So we find that here in America, we want to be rugged individualists, and in Asian cultures, they want to be part of a group. Okay, so it's really, really revealing stuff. Blah. Okay, so now moving on, self-knowledge. It's amazing. We're going to get to attribution theory later. We're going to talk about how we understand other people and understand their social behavior and stuff. But thing is that we mistakenly believe that we have a perfect knowledge of ourselves, at least, right? Though I understand. I mean, again, we're going to find that we also have mistaken knowledge of other people. We think we know more about them than we do, but we think we know more about ourselves than we do. Okay, so we make mistakes. Like, say, we often mistakenly believe that our behavior is not influenced. Like, here, we think we aren't influenced by commercials, but other people are. Really? You're not influenced by a commercial, but everybody else is. Wow, good for you, buddy. We are really bad at predicting our behavior. Let's say they'll ask, and this is actually really hard in political polling, because they'll take a poll of not just they'll either take a poll of registered voters in some cases, or they'll take a poll of likely voters. A likely voter who is somebody that says, what is the probability that you'll vote in the next election? Oh man, 100%. I always vote. And if somebody says there's a 100% chance I'm going to vote, there's about an 80% chance that they actually will. I mean, that's how it works. Okay. we do not have great access. Well, I'm going to come back to this concept of the present versus the future self later when I talk about self-control. But suffice it to say, at the moment, we don't have as good of access to what we're going to do in the future as we believe we have access to. Um, Likewise, predicting our feelings. Here's a classic thing. Christopher Reeve, Superman, right? Superman is riding his horse, I don't know, 1992 or something. Falls off his horse, breaks his back. He's now paralyzed for life. In a wheelchair, he's paraplegic, okay? Now, they interviewed Christopher Reeve very shortly after he had his accident, and he says, oh my God, my life is over. I don't know what I'm ever going to do. This sucks so bad. I couldn't possibly imagine anything worse than this ever. Okay? Then what happens is they interviewed him about 2 years later, and he said, you know what? This is awesome. This is the greatest blessing I've ever had in my life because I just appreciate things I never even thought about, You just move my wheelchair into the backyard, and I can just watch and just it's amazing what you can see if you can just open your eyes and stop and look the beauty of the world and stuff. And so he actually said how great it was. So that's what impact bias is about, overestimating the enduring impact of emotion causing events. Similar to that, it's like you ask a person that just won the lottery, how happy is this, and they're going to be like, oh my God, is this awesome? I'm going to be happy forever. 1 year later, you check them, and the lottery winner's happiness level is exactly what it was before the lottery hit. Okay, okay. The wisdom and oh yeah, we run on a dual attitude system. I've already kind of talked about it. Suffice it to say, and we're going to get to this in particular when we get to prejudice, that there's two types of prejudice. There's blatant prejudice, and then there's subtle prejudice. There's a different word for it. I can't remember it offhand. But anyway, we might have an explicit verbal attitude, and we might our behavior might reflect a different thing altogether. We find that much of our attitudes are under the surface and not accessible to us, yet they influence our behaviors. And definitely we'll talk more about that in prejudice chapter. Here's one of my favorite studies. I don't really know exactly where to put this in perspective, what the importance of this is, but it's really cool. Okay, take a look here. You see the picture on the left here, this girl, and you see the picture on the right, how it actually is. So you see on the left there's not really her hands. Okay, she's standing there with her hands down by her sides. Okay, the hands belong to the girl behind her. Now she's going to sit there, and then the woman in the back there is going to start moving her hands. Will this woman standing here, our participant in the front, will she feel as though the hands belong to her? Okay, and if the person in the back just moves them, then to some degree, yes. But if you tell the woman in the front there, okay, now your left hand is going to make the okay sign, okay, it's going to go like this, all right, and then the left hand does it, and she, oh my God, if she can anticipate it, then it feels like she owns it. I'm not sure what this study really is about, but it definitely questions what our sense of self is, doesn't it? How can you fool your own brain into thinking somebody else's hand is your own? Blah, blah, blah. This one, if you read it all, basically says, if you read things that sound positive, then you're likely to say, yep, that describes me or my best friend. But if you read something negative, you're more likely to say, no, that really doesn't describe me. What a surprise, right? Self-esteem, a person's overall self-evaluation or sense of self-worth. I like this notion that self-esteem is the sum of our self-schemas and our possible selves. A self-schema, our actual selves or our beliefs about our actual selves. And then our possible selves, or the ones that we strive for, or something like that. I don't know. It's an interesting thought. But anyway, self-esteem can provide motivation. Okay, can make us provide the motivation to do things. People with high self-esteem often exhibit more achievement motivation. Sure, they strive for more because they expect that they can do more. Their high self-esteem becomes part of their self-schema, and they will interpret ambiguous social situations in that way. However, people with high self-esteem, when they face failure, start to get antagonistic. Okay, and that's a fact. We are arrogant little bastards. And that's really what this is. People with low self-esteem, when facing a threat, how antagonistic do they get? Just a little bit. People with high self-esteem, when facing a threat, how antagonistic? Very. According to William James, self-esteem is a mathematical equation. It can be calculated mathematically as successes over pretensions. In this case, pretensions is referring to like things that we attempt. So self-esteem is a ratio of how many things we succeed at divided by how many things we attempt to do. Okay? And so according to this notion, you can raise self-esteem by either being more successful. If you are successful at more things, you'll raise your self-esteem. But if you give up your pretensions, then that also can raise your self-esteem. You know, if you've always wanted to be a professional basketball player, okay, and you're 5'2", right? Chances are you're never going to be a professional basketball player, and therefore this pretension or this thing that you would attempt to do to become a professional basketball player will always be dragging on this equation. If you just give up that dream, that too can raise self-esteem, according to this idea. Okay? And I had a student one time that was just fascinated with this thing, and he put together a research project. It was very interesting. We presented this one at the Southwest Psychological Association one year. I think it was probably 2005, 6, 2007, spring of '07, I bet. It was in Fort Worth that year, so maybe. But anyway, in this study, I don't want to get into it because it was a lot of details. He took this idea and he had people create their self-esteem. You know, he did a Rosenberg self-esteem scale. It doesn't matter. It's just a measure, a psychological test that attempted to quantify self-esteem. And then he had people. He had them. Now, what I want you to do is imagine that you have had this major failure and setback in your life. Imagine that you've had these successes in your life. And he literally added and subtracted or added failures or successes to people's lives and say, now do the Rosenberg scale again. And it was amazing. You know, you had him get a score, and then you had him imagine all kinds of successes, and then you had him imagine what their score would be, you know, how they would take the test if they had all of those successes, and their score went up exactly in predictable ways, or down if they experienced failures. It was just a very cool study to show how this mathematical equation really worked out. It was just a beautiful concept. Self-efficacy is a sense that one is competent and effective. It's a little different from self-esteem and self-worth. Self-efficacy, in fact, is at the root of Erik Erikson's theory of social development, where I don't remember which one of his early stages, where children, industry versus inferiority, I guess it would be, where children develop a sense that they are in charge, that they control things, that their actions have their actions matter or something like that. And this, according to Erik Erikson, is one of the foundational points upon which a healthy social development occurs. So self-efficacy is a belief that one is capable of performing, able to attain goals, is capable of getting things done, something like that. A similar concept is locus of control, the extent to which people perceive outcomes as internally controllable by their own efforts and as externally controlled or by chance or outside forces. Somebody with an internal locus of control that experiences failure might say, oh shit, I just didn't try hard enough, I really got to work on this. Somebody with an external locus of control might, if they experience failure, might say, wow, the world just shits on me, okay? And if your answer is, I failed because the world shits on me, what are you going to do to make it better? Nothing. You're a victim. Okay? So, of course, again, this is a continuum. Nobody has a purely internal or a purely external locus of control, but clearly an internal locus of control leads to healthier outcomes. A purely external locus of control would almost inevitably lead to clinical depression. Okay? And I'm hoping the next slide involves, yes, it does, learned helplessness. if you have a completely external locus of control, what's going to happen is you're going to get this feeling of helplessness, victimization. I failed because the world shits on me and I have no control over it, or something like that. In this classic study, Martin Seligman took these dogs and he put them into a little device. In fact, he put them into this device where the left side has both sides, in fact, have an electric floor, and there's a short wall in between them. And he put these dogs into, let's say, side A, according to this little picture. And every once in a while, at random intervals, a little light would come on. And when the light would come on, 20 seconds later, the floor give them an electric shock. Oh shit! Ah! And these dogs just experienced this, and they were tied up. They were harnessed. There was nothing they could do about it. A second group of dogs was put into the same scenario, okay, except they weren't harnessed and they weren't put on a leash. And so the light would come on 20 seconds later, side A would go. However, if at any point during that 20 seconds they just stepped over this little short wall between these two compartments, the dogs would not get electrified. Now, at first, of course, these dogs didn't know what the heck was going on. Shit, okay? But pretty soon, every dog works it out. The light comes on, they step over to a compartment B, and they never get a shock, okay? And so after a couple of shocks, they figure it out, and they never get shocked again, okay? And in fact, these dogs, when the light comes on, they're just, and their tail is wagging, and they're just a happy-go-happy, and they just step over the wall, nothing. Now go back to those first dogs, okay? Now, take off the leash, take off the harness, and put them back into that exact same scenario. The light comes on, 20 seconds later, the electric floor goes, but if you just step over that short wall at any point in that 20 seconds, you don't get zapped. Ready? Now, the dogs in this first original group, when the light comes on, their tail just drops, they just lay down, and they just quit. They never solve it. They never figure out how to go over the short wall. They quit, they give up, they develop this sense of learned helplessness, this hopelessness, this I suck, the world is just shits on me, and I have no control over the world. And they literally begin to exhibit all of the symptoms of clinical depression. I mean, it's a dog. What does clinical depression look like in a dog? But they exhibit these symptoms because they quit after experiencing this uncontrollable situation. Well, human beings have very similar responses. It turns out, say for example, if people in old age homes, this was a classic, in old age homes, they had two different groups. One that they had standard care practices, and one where they allowed the people at these facilities to make their own choices, like where should we put the plants in the TV room, which shows should we watch, when should we eat dinner, what should we have for dinner. And people that were allowed to make these choices were much healthier, much happier, of course. They were rated as higher functioning by the staff. They literally had longer lifespans if they could make their own choices. So it was a very big thing, this idea of learned helplessness. Learned helplessness and self-determination. This is, wow, I believe it was a comparison of happiness with how much people are in control of their own lives. And it was just a really funky graph, but the idea is in those places where people have more control in their lives, they're happier. Wow. So generally, increased self-determination leads to increased life satisfaction. That makes sense. But there are costs to having too many choices. Sometimes, let's say, for example, when you have cable with 1,000 channels, my wife, she pulls a little trick where she just flips the channels, because she's so worried that she's going to miss something better that she can never stop and enjoy the one that she has. And that is a fact. If there are too many choices, like Baskin-Robbins 31 flavors, rather than stopping and enjoying a good bowl of vanilla ice cream, instead, if somebody gives you vanilla ice cream, you go, damn, I could have had the strawberry pecan. Strawberry pecan? Maybe not. Maybe that would kind of be gross. In fact, there's an entire theory in the realm of decision making called regret theory, which says when we make decisions, we always take into account not only the consequences of our decisions or the outcomes of our decisions, but also the regret we would feel. Let's say if I choose car A and car A turns out to be a lemon, how much will I regret having chosen car A? And I'll use that regret as part of the value when making decisions, but that's a different class. The self-serving bias is the tendency to perceive oneself favorably. Yeah, we do. We tend to think we're better than everybody. It's crazy. Um, they they it's like 75% of people believe they're in the top 10% of safe drivers. Okay. I don't think that's possible, buddy. The math doesn't work out. And it doesn't really matter which kind of a question you ask. 75% of people will always be in the top 10%. Uh, Unrealistic optimism. You can read all of these, right? These are just definitions. But unrealistic optimism, we feel great about ourselves. And don't get me wrong, it's important to feel good about yourself. But if you are unrealistically optimistic, that can lead to some real problems. In fact, this is, I blame this on society. Don't get me wrong, I think it's important that children be taught certain things. But let's say, for example, a song that they now have children singing in preschool goes like this: I am special, I am special, yes I am, yes I am. Now that's an important idea. I mean, to give some good self-esteem to the children. But if you really stop and think about it, if everybody is special, then nobody is special. Right? Isn't that what it means? Isn't that the whole definition of it? And so we are laying this into our children, and in some ways, this is giving children a sense of entitlement, and it's really troublesome, and it really carries forward into the college classroom. Hopefully, I'm not talking about you, but I definitely have an awful lot of my students that have been raised with this unrealistic optimism in this sense that I am special and deserve, and it really creates a bad situation where it is my ugly job to break it down to reality. No, you're not. Okay? But I got straight A's in high school. So did everybody else. I'm not impressed. Your writing sucks shit. All right? And I don't want to have to say it. I have no desire to have to say it, but I have to say it because nobody has said it before me. Okay? So sometimes it has to be done. So if everybody's special, nobody's special. Ha. The self-serving bias provides motivation, overconfidence, blah, 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 blah. We also think, by the way, not just self-serving bias, but the group-serving bias. Our group is the best. Yeah. Self-presentation. This is actually pretty interesting. We all know this. The sense of the person that we portray to the rest of the world is incredibly monitored and guarded. For some people more than other, but sometimes we'll do something like false modesty. Oh, I'm not really all that great, or self-handicapping. Sometimes what we'll do is we'll say, "Oh, I'm really bad at this," so that if you do suck, you have an excuse. I already told you I was bad. Okay. We often do impression management, right? We are acutely aware of what other people are thinking about us and what other people know and who knows what about who. And so where self-presentation is the act of expressing oneself and behaving in ways designed to create a favorable impression or an impression that corresponds to one's ideals. So clearly, my self-presentation when I'm, let's say, meeting a girlfriend's mother for the first time is different than the self-presentation I give when trying to connect to a new group of friends or something like that. Self-monitoring is being attuned to the way one's presence, oneself, and social situation, blah, 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 blah. That's a lot of words. All right, now I want to take one more side note. It's not a side note. It's all self. I want to talk about self-control a little bit. This is my line of research. This could be presented in line with. Anyway, self-control is my line of research. My degree is in experimental psychology, subfield of judgment and choice. And so I just study decision making, in particular self-control decision making. So I want to talk about self-control a little bit as a behavioral outcome and as a internal thought process. So here it is. When we make decisions, we the choices that we make are usually between things that are easy and things that are hard. You know, like your alarm clock rings, and I can either get out of bed or hit the snooze button. Right? One's easy, one's hard. Or I've got $10 and I'm walking past Burger King and I know I needed to pay my phone bill, but I smell the Burger King. Oh my God, do I buy the Burger King, the easy thing, or do I say no, no Burger King, the hard thing? I mean, we do this. When we make decisions, our decisions have consequences. And generally speaking, again, I'm kind of simplifying, but the consequences of our decisions break down into things that happen immediately and things that happen later in time. Say, for example, with the alarm clock, the immediate consequence of hitting the snooze button is it feels good. And the long-term consequence is I missed class. For the consequences of the getting out of bed, at the short term, it doesn't feel good because I'm tired and I'd rather be in bed, but the long term consequences, I make it to school. Okay? Or, the immediate consequence of buying a Whopper is yum, and the long term consequences are, oh shit, I can't pay my phone bill. So a self-control decision is one where we choose the thing that is not fun at the moment, the thing who has a consequence that feels bad right now. The reason we ever make choices where the consequences do not feel good at the moment is because we believe that the consequences later will in fact be positive. Okay? So self-control is to choose that thing which feels bad at the moment. So now, if we think about ourselves, and in fact I hinted at it when I talked about we are not a good judge of our own behaviors in the future, and so I talked about our present self and our future self. If we can think about ourselves as existing at multiple points in time, we could talk about myself today has to suffer in order for myself tomorrow to benefit. That's what self-control is. My present self suffers while my future self benefits. Impulsiveness, on the other hand, is a scenario where my present self benefits and my future self suffers. Okay, so we can talk about the sense of self in this or this way, and redefines the way we understand self-control. So self-control in this is now a decision-making strategy in which our present self sacrifices so that our future self will gain a benefit. Okay. The problem is that by this definition, a decision-making strategy in which our present self sacrifices. Okay. The problem is today my present self is sitting here with me. My future self is tomorrow. By the time I get to tomorrow, my present self will be sitting there with me, and my future self will still be tomorrow. I must always live with my present self, and my future self is always some hypothetical in the future. And so, by definition, my present self must always sacrifice in order for my future self to benefit. But I always live in the present. Okay, this is not cool. But that is what self-control is about. Is self-control an important skill? Yes. If I had to teach my children one skill in life, it would be self-control. The ability to delay gratification, the ability to say no to things. Because this ability to say no to things is correlated with grades. Obviously, in order to have good grades in school, you must have made many choices in your life, such as, should I study tonight or watch Dancing with the Stars tonight? One feels good at the moment, assuming the Dancing with the Stars, I don't watch it, whatever. And one feels bad at the moment. Studying usually isn't all that much fun, right? But you must have made that self-control choice in order to get good grades. In order to be successful at a job, you must have made self-control choices. In order to have a high income. So all of these things on this list, ultimately happiness in life, comes from the ability to exhibit self-control. And in fact, here is a very interesting little study. I love this. This is Walter Mischel's study. He gave these kids he put the kids pretzel rod on the table and a little bell, and then he said to them, "Hey guys, these kids are like 4 years old, 5 years old. And he says, okay, hey guys, here's the deal. I know you like pretzel rods, but what I also have here is this yummy marshmallow. So the researcher's holding this marshmallow, man, and says, all right, I'm going to leave the room with a marshmallow. And if you could just wait until I come back, you can eat the marshmallow. But if you just can't resist that pretzel rod, all you got to do is ring that bell. I'll come right back into the room and you can eat the pretzel rod. Okay, so it's a game of self-control. Kids prefer the marshmallow, but they really do like that pretzel rod, especially because they can have it now. There's an immediacy to it. Well, it's very interesting. Some kids could wait longer than other kids and stuff. Then they took the amount of time a kid could wait, and remember correlational research, right? They followed up on these kids and they measured their SAT scores when they were 17. And it turns out that the kids that were able to wait for the marshmallow when they were 4 years old had a higher SAT score when they were 17. It was just a very, very strong correlation. Kids that could demonstrate self-control at 4 had higher SAT scores when they were 17. Assuming that means they get into better schools, they have better grades, they have better jobs, they have better incomes. Those are all correlated measures along the same line. So it's something which comes early and is incredibly important. But what's kind of scary is that the kids that could wait longer at 4 years old were kids, well, older, of course, I mean, because they weren't all four. They were 4, 4.5, 5, etc. But the kids that could wait longer came from richer families. They were smarter to begin with. They were rated as more socially responsible by their teachers. They were rated as more ambitious by their teachers. So we find that those children from rich parents, and this is kind of crazy, we already said it, that self-control is related to income. So assumingly the parents somehow are able to exhibit self-control and be richer parents. They raise children that in some way or another are modeling self-control. The children can exhibit self-control, and therefore the children become richer. So, wow, this is important stuff. Okay? And then, what's my last slide here? So if self-control is a sacrifice by our present self for the benefit of the future self, and so we can talk about the idea of social cooperation. Okay? Self-control is the self-sacrifices for the benefit of the group. Social cooperation is a sacrifice of the individual's best interest for the benefit of the other's best interest. We find social cooperation or lack of in those situations where there's like road work and traffic has to merge together, and we see some people that are very cooperative, they get in line the way they're supposed to, and some that are just selfish bastards and they drive on the shoulder as far as they can before they cut in line, and they don't wait. And lo and behold, those people that cut in line like that, they make every single person in line suffer. That one person saves 5 minutes, every person in line loses 10 seconds. Social cooperation is the act of sacrificing the self to benefit the others. People that are good at self-control tend to be better at social cooperation as well. I did some interesting research on this recently. We're going to come back to this when we get into chapter something. Chapter something behind my head. Chapter 13. When we get to chapter 13 on conflict and peacemaking, we'll come to this idea of social cooperation and the prisoner's dilemma and the tragedy of the commons. So we talk about it in this chapter in self-control, but we'll return to it later in the idea of social cooperation. All right, that's all we have to talk about on the sense of self. As I said, your self is what comes into all social relationships and becomes the core of all social relationships. So keep that in mind, that that's where we're going with this. All right, see you for chapter 3 next time.